Welcome, everyone. If you are here for the panel, you are ready for robots in the warehouses, you are in the correct space. Super excited to be moderating this panel today. My name is Jake Hall. I go by the name The Manufacturing Millennial, and I have the opportunity of being an influencer and thought leader in the automation robotics space, where last year I had 50 million views encouraging people to adopt automation on social media. With me today is some amazing leaders in our industry who are hoping to bring lots of insight to you around when it comes to robotics, automation, adoption, and warehouse and logistics industry. I encourage you during this panel, if you have questions, there should be a QR code on both sides of the screen here. If you have questions, feel free to scan those, and those will pop up on our screen where we can hope to answer those questions. And of course, if we run out of time, we welcome you to join you in the Mugen booth 321 in the Expo Hall at the end of this session for further up answering questions. But with that, I have some amazing panelists. I'll start out with Ross. He is the founder and CEO of Mugen. Next to him is Santos. He is the director of advanced engineering for Walmart. We have Randy Randolph, the VP of strategic partnerships and channels for the Americas. And then wrapping things up, we have Anthony Cantrell. He is the executive director for global accounts for warehouse and logistics. They got to shorten your title. That is long. But to kick things off with, I would like to kick things off with you, Ross, and give us a quick 60-second intro. But what is the state of the industry, and what are we hoping for the audience to get out of today's panel?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction there, Jake. Appreciate it. So my name is Ross. I'm a co-founder and CEO here of Mugen, basically one of the intelligent robot controller companies out there. Actually, we have probably maybe the most intelligent robot installations out there right now. And what that means is basically having a robot understand the environment, using 3D vision and complex sensors to go and do complex tasks that traditional robots have not been able to do. And the problem here is, how do we deploy that into the real field? And I think that requires cooperation from our vendors, suppliers of this hardware, but also from our end users, right? It is a collaboration that all parties need to do in order to really succeed. It's not just like, okay, vendor, give me this, otherwise I won't buy it. But it is a lot more fluid than that. And which is why, our panel today, consisting of, representing actually some of the top vendors and manufacturers in North America, and one of the top logistic companies here in retail companies, the top in most things, I guess, in North America. I'm looking forward to conversation with you guys about basically how we bring robots into the warehouse.
All right, good afternoon. Santos Cerda, once again, thank you for coming. I've been with Walmart for about 17 years now. Director of Advanced Engineering, looking into the ambient warehouses, specifically trying to drive value and create value for our customers and our associates within the supply chain. Thank you for coming.
Good afternoon. My name is Randy Randolph, and I'm with Geek Plus America. We're a global AMR manufacturer, one of the largest AMR manufacturers in the world. We have the broadest portfolio of AMRs that are really a toolbox to solve problems within the distribution and warehouse arenas, as well as manufacturing and parcel. We work through our partners and with our partners and with their end customers to drive higher picking efficiencies up to 3x of what your people are able to do today by eliminating walking. And we're focused on reducing the footprint needed to store product in your warehouse by as much as 40%.
Hi, I'm Anthony Cantrell. Little background, I'm a mechanical engineer from The Ohio State University. Kind of started my career in mechanical design with an automation company, building turnkey automation systems, and spent pretty much my whole career in technical type sales, different motors, drives, PLCs, for about 12 years, and then moved on to the robotics side, automation. Spent 5 years at KUKA Robotics, and then for the last 4 years, I've been with Fanuc, and I'm part of their EST group, which is the executive sales team, and I focus only on the warehouse and logistics side of things. So with that role, I basically drive strategy, partnerships, and handle the key account management for Fanuc.
Awesome. Thanks, Anthony. So I'm going to kick off this first question to you, Santos. And we all know how much 2020 transformed and really fast forwarded the way people buy things, the way people buy more product online, the way people use digital applications to buy the stuff. And I really want to hit on, when looking at automation and technology, how are you determining how it becomes successful, or what is a successful solution when Walmart is looking at all these different options out there? What is driving to say this is going to work for us?
Awesome. Thanks for the question. Yeah, I think one of the things that we look at internally at Walmart is first and foremost level set expectations, not only internally but externally for the vendor as well. And so we developed what we call a technology readiness level. So there we focus on where exactly do we think the technology sits, regardless of what the vendor or others have to say about it in the market. So we want to develop our own opinion of it. And so we want to understand if this is a technology that's just being developed, if it's ready for a proof of concept or POC. Is it just a proof of technology where we just literally need to understand whether it works or not? So that's really the first set of criteria, I guess, that we go through. And then after that, it really just depends on, what value do we think this is going to create for us and for our customers, right? The people in the supply chain warehouses. So we ultimately try to create a roadmap that, once again, level sets expectations. And we are able to communicate to our leaders what the phases of this technology will be. If not, I believe incorrect expectations will then lead to maybe not so positive things, right? Bad perceptions in the warehouse, things like that, which we like to avoid. So that's really it. I mean, we are really focused on, once we understand where it's at, develop a plan to ultimately take that technology to the next step, whether it be step 2 or 3 or 8 to 10, right? Regardless of what that may be.
Setting expectations early on is key. So, Ross, you're deploying the solutions that that Walmart's looking at. How do you tie in when you're bringing in multiple companies like Fanuc, Geek Plus? What are you doing to understand the customer's existing needs and problems, and where do you start when you're looking at a brand new deployment for a company who might not even have any type of automation on their warehouse floor right now?
Right. The most important thing to take into account when creating automation systems, especially ones that have been manual before applications and then turning to automation, is that the customers, they're sort of used to people handling all these various different scenarios, right? And automation systems, as a lot of you know, they're pretty fixed. You sort of give them the application type, you give them what they need to do, and if something is outside of the bounds of that, then all of a sudden the system stops, right? And really, one of the first things we do is how do we avoid that system stoppage, right? Because in the end of the day, if you have to reset or babysit an automation system every 5 minutes, that's not an automation system. That's just a very expensive toy, which could maybe get past demos, but it's not going to get past to actually adding value to the customer. So one of the early things at Mujin that we've sort of really tried to emphasize on is let's get that real world experience. Let's actually sleep on the factory floor if need be, and really understand the pain points of the customer, right? Where do systems fail? Where do they not fail? In retrospect to, I would say, what many high-tech companies are doing nowadays, which they all think it's about the AI or it's about the algorithm. Actually, I would say that's like 1% of the battle. And the other 99%, which they ignore, ends up biting them biting them somewhere, where they sort of like learn like how hard actually it is.
So this panel is you are ready for robots. So let's talk about robots. And Randy, this next question is for you. When we're looking at an ecosystem, when we're looking at a warehouse floor, what is a good ecosystem to deploy? What is a good ecosystem of deploying robots and automation? What does that look like?
Thank you. Great question. Everybody looks a bit different. So when we look at an ecosystem, we kind of start at the ground level. Do they have floor? I mean, we've been in warehouses. Some of you may have been in dirt floor warehouses before, but we're looking for a reasonable floor for our AMRs to move around in. We're also looking for, the existing infrastructure, things like the IT infrastructure. We're also looking at the state of is it an existing brownfield that we're going to collaborate with existing technology, whether that be conveyor or WMS systems. We're also looking for, what could be the next great improvement in a greenfield operation. So when you get a clean slate, you can look at things slightly different. So when we look at ecosystems, we look at what's possible in the near term and what the roadmap might be looking like in the future, so we can scale into it.
Yeah, no, that's good. Anthony, I want you to add on to this. So if you're not familiar with the manufacturing space, Fanuc is one of probably the world's largest robot manufacturers for industrial robots and now collaborative robots. But how has industrial robots changed when it's moved outside of just manufacturing and into the warehouse and the logistics industry? What do you see as what's enabling these robots to be successful today? Because when in the manufacturing space, right, we're making 1 million of the exact same part over and over again. There's zero variability with what we're doing in a lot of cases. That's completely different in warehouse and logistics.
Sure. I'm going to give a little bit of history to start this conversation. If you look at industrial robot history, right, you actually got to go back 40 years. So that's where Fanuc got their start 40 years ago, and there was really one customer at that point, and that was the automotives, right? They were the ones buying and pushing the envelope on robotics, and Fanuc was there from the beginning, and they've been there ever since for 40 years. Now, if you look at that, there's been plenty of the same challenges that we've seen early years there that we're seeing now. So with that, if you look at the fact that Fanuc's taken thousands of these new robotic opportunities in the automotive and has taken them from the pilot stage to the scale stage over 40 years, that's a pretty big achievement. And we still have those same customers today, so it's been a long-lasting relationship. Now, if you move forward, right, and you look at the last 20 years, now you're starting to see some of the other industries starting to absorb robotics. So, and that's where you get a lot of new robot development, things like Delta robots for high-speed picking and Scare robots for things like assembly machines where you need high repeatability, and of course collaborative. So now we have collaborative robots where you can obviously work next to an industrial robot. So you look at that kind of progression, and then you say, okay, well, look at what we're doing now. Fast forward to right now. Right now, you look at the agriculture, right? Agriculture. They're now using industrial robots to pick produce. You look at fast food restaurants, and they're now using industrial robots to flip hamburgers. So there's applications that are being done that we would never expect that was ever possible. And if you look at that, and you lay this out, I said, from the beginning, you look at a pie chart, and half all the robot business 40 years ago was automotive. Now, today, you got about 50% automotive and about 50% GI. And GI is what we call general industry, and that's kind of everything else outside of automotive. That slice of the pie is growing a lot faster. So where does warehouse fit? Warehouse fits in that GI space. And the interesting thing about the warehouse space, even though we've put in thousands of robots into the warehouse space already, we haven't even scratched the surface on where this space is going. So I saw a statistic recently that said 80% of warehouses out there have zero automation. So there's tons of opportunity. With opportunity comes investment. So we're seeing very large amounts of VC venture capital money coming in to this space for all sorts of startup companies like drone companies and AMR companies, and the companies that we work with every day, which are the vision and AI companies. So the question is how are they affecting? I wanted to give a little bit of history there. How are they affecting what we're doing? Well, quite frankly, they're enabling us to do things that we've never been able to do before. For example, in the warehouse space, you have things like mixed SKU depow. Now we have multiple systems out there running with our partner Mugen. And, you know, that was an application that really we could never do. You have mixed palletizing. You have parcel induction singulation. You have sortation that is being done. And you even have, there's a whole lot of development now that I'm seeing on a regular basis with truck unload. So the technology's there, and I think at the end of the day, you know, to conclude here, if you look at kind of what has these startup AI companies provided, well, they're taking a really mature product. I started out talking about we've been in this for 40 years, right? They're taking a really mature product in the industrial robot, and they're making it see a little better with advanced, right? They're making it feel a little better with sensors. And at the end of the day, the most powerful part of what they're doing is the AI software gives it the ability to learn and get better every day.
So I want to jump back to one of the statements that you made. 80% of warehouses have not adopted automation. And actually, I want to open this question up to everyone here. What do you think some of the biggest misconceptions are around why more companies are not adopting automation? Like, what do you think the biggest fear is? Why a company doesn't want to justify adopting AGVs, AMRs, robots, automated systems, automated piece picking. And this is to anyone, you know, maybe Randy, if you want to start with the AGV, AMRs, but this is, you know, let's run down here. What do you think the biggest misconceptions that a person who's afraid to automate, what does that look like?
So the traditional automation within a warehouse has had a long ROI horizon, and we've all got short-term visibility in what's going to happen tomorrow or what's going to happen next season. And our investments really have to be higher in the traditional model. With AMRs, what we're seeing is people are able to scale with what they want to use today and add through basic future flexibility, the AMR model, where they can put in, if they need 50 robots today, and their business model or plan is to invest and scale to 200 over the next 3 years, they don't have to buy 200 today. They can buy, they can make that short-term investment. So
it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to scale with getting more robots than it is in trying to hire 25 more people really quickly.
Right. Well, today it is, and that's absolutely one of the drivers.
Just to comment on Randy's and Anthony's comments there for a little bit. You know, in the automotive space, we would be accustomed to building the same car many, many times. So that actually justifies the expenditure on capital equipment and the integration costs, right? Because later on, you can recover that by building 100,000 cars. The warehouse space is actually very different. And as Randy put it, you know, customers are thinking the next 1, 2, 3 years, right? So what that does is it puts a really high expectation on the automation systems, right? The automation systems have to get there in like less than a month and work, right? And right now, you know, the biggest reasons why automation technology, at least as it is today, is not so easily applicable to the warehouse is because of this variation that warehouses have, right? You can't just say, I'm going to pick up the same part 100,000 times and it's going to, you know, recover my cost. Actually, you have to pick up all the world's parts at the same time. You never know what you're going to get, whether it's like cases or eaches or whatnot. And that really requires a different way of thinking about robotics and automation in general. It's not just about, let's get the safety PLC in there, let's get the robot programmer in there and make some pick points. It's really about, does the robot understand its surroundings? Does it understand its scene? Are there the right sensors there to go and recover from all these plethora of different scenarios that the robot can get in trouble for? And because it's messy, and the warehouse of the automation in warehouses of the future, it's going to be all about how many messy situations can your automation system recover from, and can it keep the organization.
Hey, Jake, I just wanted to add real quick. I think the other thing is I keep on going back to improper expectations, right? So we need results. We need them now. We need them tomorrow. And so whenever you bring in technology that may not be ready for that, I think companies tend to just shy away from them, right? If it's an AGV and it stops, actually that was my example because we've been there before.
Give us a
And
good
you have
example.
you have to babysit it, right? So I'm not going to disclose who, but a couple years ago, we had a AGV AMR company come in. We made the commitment. We bought about 15 units. They took forever to program and get ready for the floor. Once we did that, they were finally out there. We deployed one at a time just to be safe, and they were stopped in the middle of the aisles for indefinite periods of time. And we actually created a position where we called, I think it was an AGV or AMR Wrangler, where you actually had to go get it, right? Because it just wouldn't work in the warehouse. So obviously that was not something that we were looking forward to. We wanted to bring it in, it was going to work, and it was going to go. Well, that wasn't the case. So I think a lot of the times it's again, we did a poor job of setting expectations internally. And so whenever you did that, it was yours truly's job to actually decommission them. And so that wasn't fun either, when you had to go tell your leadership that they didn't work. So anyway, that was just one thing I wanted to share, right? You have to be willing to understand where the technology's at, develop it if you need to, and if not, at least set up the proper expectations so that you don't have people kind of.
So it sounds like the ability for customization is massive when it comes to success in this.
Absolutely.
Can you give us example of, and I think when it comes to deploying robots or automation systems, it's not, you don't know what the answer needs to look like before you even commission a project. A lot of times it's you're discovering along the way, and success is a lot of times determined by how much the project can change over time.
Absolutely.
So can you go into when do you truly define a project successful, and how does working with a vendor, how much customization on their end matters along the way when you're looking at, because I'm sure you've seen a lot of solutions like you talked about. You brought in products, you had to then decommission products. So you've seen the ups and downs and the excitement of this is going to solve all your problems, and you really expectations set in, and maybe it wasn't. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I'll go back to this example, right? So we brought in the AMR AGV, and comes out, the aisles were too narrow, right? And the vendor solution was or the recommendation was for us to re-rack our building and just give them the 10 feet that they needed. And it's like, well, why do we have to change our warehouse? Why don't you customize your technology to account for whatever may be sticking out in that aisle, right? So there's this back and forth, and we didn't know, right? So to your point of when is the project successful, I think it's successful from the onset, right? Even before these vendors put foot on our warehouse, it's all about setting expectations and really painting the picture of what does success look like, right? Or if we're not successful, what is going to be our path to course correct? How often are we going to talk about correction of errors? How quickly can those correction of errors be implemented into the technology, right? So customization is big, and to be honest, I mean, I think I heard you guys say it before. We're not necessarily looking for just widgets or a widget that works, right? A lot of the companies just tell us, "Hey, buy me this widget." We want full-scale solutions, and we want partners that can come in, understand our environment, and then work with us to modify, if need be, those solutions so that they can ultimately work, right, and drive value for the customer.
Ross, go ahead and add on what you were saying, but on top of that, I want you to add, when you're working with end users, there's a lot of different end users that you work with. How do you develop a roadmap around understanding what their true problem and what their KPI is, and really look at how do you help them determine what their end goal is. Because I know from my experience being in the automation industry for like 17 years now, a lot of times the customer doesn't even know what they need. We need to automate this solution. Well, why do you need to automate this solution? What value is being driven from that? How do you develop a roadmap to actually help the customer define what success is?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, I wanted to get onto Santos's point because he actually made a lot of good ones. The AGV that couldn't move, if there was no 10-foot clearance, that wasn't like hardware issue, right? That was like just software issue, right? Okay, that's what I thought. So and this will segue nicely into what you're asking, Jake. My experience has been that customers or even some integrators, they just buy all these different components, and the hardware works amazing, right? We have 40 plus years of experience from Phonic, and their robots never break, and Geek plus, amazing mobile robots. But the problem is not hardware, right? That's not the bottleneck right now in introducing systems and getting them to work in warehouses. It ends up being software, right? And how do you actually integrate all those systems together to work as one? And just from all the experiences I've had in integrating these solutions, the more that you have like one system look at all these devices as a whole and can manage them correctly, then you actually get a lot more success. When they're like disparate pieces working together, hobbled together by an integrator who was trying to do this within a week, what you end up getting is the blaming game, where like something goes wrong in the system, nobody knows what, and all the vendors are pointing to each other saying it's not my fault, it's their fault, right? They didn't do XYZ. And I think that's what end users like Walmart also get very frustrated about, is in the end, like, they want their problem fixed, but they don't even know who to go to because everybody's pointing the finger the other way. And this sort of like the approach that Mujin takes to solve this problem is to create a real intelligent robot platform where all of these vendors, all these devices can hook up together, and you can not only just see where the bottlenecks are or where the errors are, but the device can actually act in unison together to actually form the entire solution. Because from a bird's eye view, if you look at the whole robot system, it is like one thing, right? It's like one entity that's like a living, breathing thing that's you should sort of take care of as one thing, not like disparate parts together. To segue into Jake's question, how do we get customer satisfaction or make sure we solve their problem? The first thing is to understand why they are asking the thing that they're asking. Many times, customers, they want to get into automation and they don't know, they have like a thread to pull on, right? And they just keep on pulling it until something comes out. So we would basically, if we don't actually ask the important questions of why do you need this or where you're going to use it, what's going to end up happening is basically we're going to end up with 100 different designs, right? And hopefully they like one, right? So that's not a very efficient way of doing things. Compute that ROI, figuring out how much manual labor is actually going to get automated here, and help the customer with their business case, right? Because in the end of the day, all customers have their own budgets, they have their own reporting lines, they must justify the automation in their warehouse. And no matter how much they love robotics, or no matter how cool of AGVs or picking robots they want, the decision makers are going to be like, well, is this actually adding value, right? So showing that value and focusing on that value, if it's throughput, if it's error rate, if it's the capability of the system, right? So if a robot can only handle 10% out of the workload of the warehouse, is that adding value to the customer? And you just have to ask the customer and have a conversation about that, and basically figure it out from there. But one of the things that I can say for certain that is of paramount importance is to reduce the number of stoppages and error rates in the system. Because no matter how high of a throughput your system is, whether it's like 2,000 cases an hour or whatnot, if it stops like 5 times an hour or 10 times an hour, none of that is going to matter in the end.
Yeah, I'll just add that we're here to talk about readiness for or your readiness in warehouses, and a lot of our clients are looking at incremental changes to start with, and I think we can amongst us we can agree that we can be very incremental, but we can also accelerate that and scale that very quickly. And we're seeing a lot of large companies and small companies start with a relatively, I'd say, a medium size POC, proof of concept. Now, we're not proving out that the robots work. We're proving out that it works for them. And then they get buy-in and scale these to multi-sites and to broader applications within their warehouse. Sometimes we're starting out with a couple of work cells. Sometimes we're talking about a work cell that's or a series of work cells that are manual pick, but goods to person delivery. And at the same time, they'll have a hybrid station to kind of benchmark robot to robot versus robot to human to build comfort. And so these POCs right now are really proving out at scale. And I won't get into our relationship with some of the people here directly, but they've been very successful, and they've built and increased over time. And by the way, we don't have any robot wranglers in any systems. Just to clear that up,
We don't anymore.
Yeah, and you don't either, right? Because we can't tolerate that. So there were some early adopters out there putting robots in warehouses, and we just got to be honest about that. Those have been replaced, but they've also left some wounds with some of the clients and partners that are out there. So we've got to go in and reassure that. I can comfortably say that thousands of robots within a single distribution center is not out of the question these days. We're doing hundreds and hundreds of them in a single site without the kind of problems that the early test robots were running.
Yeah, I want to add on to that, Randy. It was interesting what you said there, where traditionally robots, it's been amazing to see how robots have evolved over time when it comes to the adoption. 40 years ago, robots were working in isolated cells, completely by themselves, completely away from humans, behind gates. There was zero collaboration. 10 years ago, we saw a lot more adoption for collaborative robots, where now we're seeing people and humans working alongside robots. And now we're seeing this new evolution of robots working directly with other robots now. And I think, we're seeing that out, on the booth floor at 321, where robots are picking from robots, handling that product and placing it in other robots. How has that changed the way warehouses, develop their solutions and what the efficiency looks like? What would you say is enabling that to happen today? From the AMR AGV side, Geek Plus, from the industrial robot side with Fanuc. I'd love you guys to answer that.
So let me just, I'll set you up and then you can go. The thing that's driving it is our clients and their lack of being able to get labor, right? And for the labor they do get to stay past lunch the first day at high volume picking or peak season. And so we're being asked to have a labor enhancer or a labor replacement that will work 3 shifts and weekends and holidays. And so that's coming from the market. And so when you actually have robots that enable humans, you're now asking, you're still scaling with people. So the robot to robot technology is really setting you up for utilizing the resources that you do need to handle manual processes, to handle those and let the robots collaborate with the other robots. I would just say this, that speed and safety between robots is less of an issue than robots integrating with people. It's just robots will operate consistently between one another. They'll operate day and night, and that to me is what's one of the key drivers.
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of lessons learned over the last 10 to 20 years with regards to bringing a lot of different things together. We've been doing that in the manufacturing space for many years, and 20 years ago it was all these different type of components and different brands that would come in, different industrial buses, and it was a really hard thing to bring things together. Now we're so much further along from that perspective. The communications, the industrial protocols are more common, and some of that handshaking stuff is there. I think when you're bringing multiple systems together. And working together, and he says robots with robots, that could be AMRs with 6-axis robots, some of this stuff. I think the thing I guess the advice I would give would be to really do your due diligence with the partners that you're choosing. There's a lot of companies out there. There's a lot of new companies out there, and I think it's real important to lift up that hood and really understand what's under there. We invite people at FANUC to really dig in because I think long term there's a lot to it. As some of these guys on the panel know, when you're installing equipment, you've got to know how to install the equipment. You got to know how to maintain the equipment. You have to know how to service the equipment over time, and that comes with experience. Also comes with a lot of know-how from many years of doing this stuff. It requires infrastructure. It requires training, right? So, another thing that we do at FANUC in a pretty big way is try to make sure that we're training our future workforce. So, we have 1,500 robots in schools. And the interesting thing about that 1,500 number is 20% of those are high schools. So there's this whole idea of pick your right partners, understand how to install, maintain, service equipment over time, but also we've got to train our future workforce.
Just to add on to that, I think it's excellent, Anthony. I think everybody would agree in this room that the simpler the system is, the less it will break and the more reliable it will be. And so, the robot-to-robot interaction makes the system actually simpler because we don't have to deal with human operators going in and out of the cell, maybe messing things up, doing all sorts of things that later on, the people programming the cell and commissioning the cell, they have to take all this into account when they're commissioning the cell, right? Because human safety is the number one most important thing. And no matter what, you have to do it, right? But actually, the more robot-to-robot interaction you have, the cheaper your system will be, and the simpler it will be. And as Randy also put it, also faster, right? Because you don't have to worry about safety speeds or having all these complex sensors, like trying to sense where the humans are. So, what is the warehouse of the future going to look like? There's not going to be that much people in it. It's going to be, like a big glorified vending machine. Right? You put product in and you get product out. And what goes on inside? Humans are not going to be there. And, that's a future where, it actually adds quality of life. And for businesses, it adds stability, right? Because you know what you're going to get out of that. And a lot of our, the vendors that we work with every day, I see them, getting more and more protocols out there so that systems can talk to each other, robot to robot, and that is much more efficient. And that is basically, the sole purpose of what our company stands for at Mujin, which is how do we get full automation to the masses faster.
So just one other, it's just a side note here, but the variability or the variance with humans is kind of an interesting thing, and I'll just give you a very brief example. We put in a goods-to-person system, and respecting safety, putting it foremost, we put safety switches in every work cell. Then the client had to go back and put signs on every safety switch that said, "Do not press this button unless the robots are physically attacking you." Because what was happening is during break, the tendency was to hit the button and it would shut down the entire robot system and everybody would go out. So that's a variable we couldn't possibly have imagined, but it's just an example of, when you introduce humans with robots, just an interesting aspect that you would never think of. So.
So I tell you a couple things, Ross, you mentioned. Interoperability, I think, is one that, we're seeing a lot more happen between an industrial robot, which ran a completely different protocol than a mobile robot working together is a success within itself. I would like to talk a couple things. One is, you mentioned, Ross, on how we're going to see more and more robots entering the warehouses and we're going to see people exiting. Can you talk about the importance of a digital twin a little bit, and what a digital twin is and how that actually matters when it comes to understanding how your system's running? And then I'm going to open up the question to the rest of the panel as well. At the end of the day, how is automation and robots truly benefiting an end user? And I know we're a few minutes left, but at the end of the day, what are we seeing as what it's truly solving to make things better for the customers in the warehouse industry? Ross, we'll start with you on that.
All right. Thanks for that, Jake. So traditionally, robots have been programmed by languages. You'd have waypoints. You do it line by line, and that's not the way intelligent robots are actually ever going to get out into this world effectively and scalably. So what Mujin has done is, instead of doing this manual programming, we try to do everything autonomous, right? Autonomous decision making. And the only way we're going to get that is if the robot understands what its surroundings are. And you can actually see this in our booth today. I think it's the only robot moving right now in the show floor, so hard to miss. But you'll be able to see the digital twin there, and you'll see that everything is just synchronized perfectly, right? All of the tools, all of the devices, all of the AMRs, like the robot state, the gripping force, the parts that are detected, like everything is just in this one digital twin, one environment. And only then can we actually start getting autonomous motion, right? And why is that important? It's because things change, applications change so fast nowadays that we don't have 6 months to integrate. We actually have a week, right? And how can we actually improve the programming of these systems to a point where all you're doing is just modeling where the obstacles are in the world, right? And then the robot from there on can take care of things. And I would say this type of methodology, you're going to start seeing more in your intelligent robots the more you deploy. And this type of system that can concert between these robots is going to be vital to basically improving the ROI of the systems, and at the same time allowing people to get robots up and running quick within even a day of themselves. So definitely check it out in our booth.
Awesome. Hey, I want to just make a quick call out there. I think we talk about, sometimes people replacements or taking people out of the warehouse. I think it's important to us to recognize that what we're doing here is, the way I see it anyway, is helping people learn new skills, right? We are addressing the jobs that people don't want to do. I don't know very many of you in the room that want to be in a hot trailer or cold trailer unloading freight all day. And so I think it's important to recognize that piece, right? It's not that we're taking the jobs away, but we are, in my opinion, upskilling people and giving them the opportunity to learn how to actually manage or program these systems, right? And that's where I see the value, Jake, as well, right? It's not just about the widget doing the thing. It's also about the opportunity that it creates for all of our associates, for example, and again, the ability to learn something different.
And, to add on to that real quick, I think it's also understanding is, what are you doing to draw the next generation into your industry? The fact of my 5-year-old daughter is programming Lego Mindstorm sets on her iPad at the age of 5. My daughter's programming robots at 5 years old. She's never going to be attracted to an industry that isn't leveraging technology that she's used to. She's never going to go into a brownfield facility that is 30 to 40 years old with technology and be excited about it. So if you want to actually have a future workforce that wants to work for you, you need to adopt technology.
Absolutely. I mean, how many of your kids practice unloading trucks in the garage when
We got one.
the door closed? I don't believe it, Josh. But that's kind of to the point, right? I mean, it's people attracted to that fun new technology and not so much the some of the labor that I grew up with, right? So
It's also just a basic. people want to be productive, right? And the more productive they are, the more valuable they are to your client, your company as associates. So we look at robots as a productivity gain. There's no value added by walking around in a warehouse. AMR is bringing goods to you where you can actually pick or add value added services or do other things. That's much better, both productivity and throughput for your organization. And they recognize they're more valuable that way as well.
Yeah, I think that, you look at this warehouse space, it's a little bit different because, for one, they've always just thrown more people at the problem. And they were able to get away with that for a very long time. And, no matter what industry we talk to, there's a shortage of people, right? And we all know that. And the warehouse jobs are really tough jobs. In general, I mean, and not only that, but they have a supervisor that's different than any other. It's usually a camera and AI and something looking over your back as you're picking, and they're looking at the number of times you went through per hour, and they're trying to gain efficiency. So the jobs are really tough, and I think that the key to this warehouse space over time is pick the simpler applications first, start there, have some success in your warehouse, and then go into some of the more difficult automation tasks over time. I've seen too many times over the years where people start with the hardest application in their facility, they fail, and they don't come back to automation for many, many years. So.
Awesome. As we do a little bit of foresight out, we have 2 minutes left. So real quick question. Where do we see the biggest, where do you envision robots in the warehouses in 5 years from now? Like what do you see as different now compared to where we're going to be in 5 years? Anyone with a quick tidbit plug?
You're going to see them where people don't like to do the jobs. Like I said before, I mean, nobody likes to be in those environments. And I believe that's where we're focused, right? We believe that our associates deserve better, and we are very strategically focused on finding solutions in those areas. So anything that's very harsh environment or very strenuous, that's what our focus is.
The other thing to add to this as well is probably the youngest person on this panel right now, the risk adoption for robots is completely different than it was 15, 20 years ago. Ross hit on it a little bit when it came to the way we program robots now, the way we interact with robots. But before, you needed to have a degreed engineer to solve any problem that was related to a robot, where now the learning curve to robotics, I want to say, is a lot lower right now. So that should be not as a big of a discouraging thing to enter automation into this space. Santos, I'm going to kind of have you wrap things up as we're under 1 minute now. What should be the key takeaway from the audience here when it comes to adopting automation in warehouses?
Yeah, again, I would say when you approach companies like Walmart, don't feel afraid to make assumptions, and ultimately help us set the proper expectations. Right, we are internally a team like myself. We are your cheerleaders in a sense, where we have to go in and internally sell some of this technology to our leaders. And the best way to do that is if we can partner together, tell the true story, be clear on the assumptions, and then ultimately set expectations. Right, if we do that correctly, then I think our leaders and the rest of the industry will buy in.
I would encourage everyone, because I'm a true believer in seeing is believing with this technology, and I would establish a quick business case, and then insist you need to go out and see it, either in an experience center of one of the partners, or in full operation at full scale. And don't be afraid to ask the associates, if you're given permission, to find out how their expectations, because I think it'll share a lot. We've had people say, I don't have to walk 10 miles anymore, or I am able to focus on things that I really like doing for the company. So I would encourage you to insist on site visits, and do it early, because I think what you're going to find is you can get a CEO or a board of director or a champion within your organization. Once they see it, they greenlight these projects very quickly.
Awesome. Well, that wraps up our panel. We really appreciate everyone's time. Ross, Santos, Randy, Anthony, thank you guys so much. We encourage you to join us if you have questions. I apologize. There was a few up on the board. I couldn't read them. I don't have that great of eyesight. They were really tiny. We encourage you. We'll all be at the Mugen booth, 321. It's right in the complete middle of the hallway. Look for the moving robots. You'll find it. But we encourage you to stop by the booth, see the demo, and once again, thank you for everyone's time.
Thank you, guys.